Hey folks, I hope you like birthdays because today is This Week in Law's 100th episode. Yay! We're here with our very first guest, Hank Berry, who's come back along to help us celebrate the big day. Also, Professor Eric Goldman from Santa Clara and Evan Brown. We're going to talk about Hillary Clinton's speech this week on internet and freedom, also the defunding of the net neutrality proposal, and who owns your digital downloads. We've got lots more to talk about too. Next up on the 100th episode of TWiL.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is TWiT.
Bandwidth for This Week in Law is provided by Cachefly at CACHEFLY.com.
This is TWiL, This Week in Law with Denise Howell, episode 100, recorded February 18, 2011. Likes us some tacos. This episode of This Week in Law is brought to you by Squarespace.com, the fast and easy way to publish a high-quality website or blog. For a free 14-day trial, go to squarespace.com/TWiL. Folks, it's episode 100 of This Week in Law. We are so happy to be here and happy to have you here along for the ride. And back from episode 1, we have Hank Berry. Hi, Hank. It's great to have you.
I'm still alive after all these years.
You're here. We recorded episode 1 of This Week in Law on October 22nd, 2006. Hank was our first ever guest, and we're thrilled you could make it back for the 100th episode.
Great to be here.
So Hank, for those of you who are not familiar with him, is a lawyer at Sidley & Austin in Palo Alto, right? In the Silicon Valley office?
Yep, we started with 3 people December 1st, 2009. We're up to 28 now, and we're having a great time.
Congratulations on that. You may be most familiar, perhaps, with Hank from his involvement as CEO of Napster once upon a time. But Hank is a brilliant guy who's been around for a long time in the venture capital and legal world around the Silicon Valley environment. So has lots of things under his belt, including I was happy to see, Hank, on your online bio, the Attention Trust board member.
Absolutely. You were there, Denise. You saw it.
We're still there. You know, if you ask Steve Gilmore what happened to the Attention Trust, he'll say it's still there. So apparently
it's still carrying on its intended purpose.
That's right. Yeah. You know, as Steve always said at the end of his show, and especially those who did not tune in. So.
Exactly. Yeah. It's a great organization for those who have not joined. Sure.
Exactly. Perfect. So attesting to the fact that Hank has been there, done that as far as the world of law and technology goes is our never not awesome guest, Eric Goldman, making a return for our 100th episode. Thank you so much, Eric, for joining us.
I'm glad to be here, and congratulations on 100 successful episodes.
Thank you so much. Why don't you tell us, you were telling me you and Hank go way back.
Hank was my main inspiration when I was a summer associate at Cooley Godward in 1993.
You're killing me.
Got to put the dates out there, Hank. Sorry.
Yes, we've all been around for longer than we care to admit, no doubt. And I've been around TWiL for almost its entire history. Coming in, I think you came in at episode 17, Evan, if I'm not mistaken, is Evan Brown joining us once again. Thank you so much, Evan. Good to see you.
Hey, well, thanks for having me. Congratulations. This is the day we've been waiting for. It's wonderful, so I'm so happy to be a part of this, and it's an awesome show thanks to the great work you do, Denise. So happy 100.
Thank you so much. Folks, Evan, of course, is our regular panelist, and he works at Hinshaw and Culbertson in Chicago and blogs at internetcases.com. So we have 3 very powerful internet technology law minds to go through some big issues here today. So the first thing I want to talk about with you guys this week is Secretary Clinton's address on internet freedom. I actually sat and listened to it all the way through. And if you haven't had the opportunity to do that, it is online through the State Department's website. We have a link to it in our show notes at delicious.com/thisweekinlaw/100. So it's very worthwhile to take a listen to the speech. The transcript is there too. And she had a lot to say about confirming the administration's commitment to an open internet in a number of different ways. She was primarily focused on censorship and totalitarian sort of regimes and giving the policy reasons why the U.S. has decided, although we do have concerns about there are prices to be paid for having an internet as open as we would like to make it, that we think in the long run that this is important to the health of society as a whole, so that there's some really good material there. There are some contradictions that one could readily pull out, and I'd like to go through those and any other thoughts you had about the speech with our esteemed panelists today. So Eric, why don't you start us off?
I guess I'm frustrated by the contradictions that are obvious. We're having so many places in my world where the U.S. government is shutting down conversations that may or may not be permissible. And so for the government to come out and say, we want the world to abide by our standards, I think we do a very poor job of being a role model. There are two on my mind that I would point to. One is the dogged pursuit of the WikiLeaks enterprise and all the different facets of that. The U.S. government has, I think, been a leader at teaching the rest of the world how you get somebody offline that you really don't like. Of course, the U.S. government learned it couldn't excise content permanently, but it sure gave a good go of it. And the other is the interplay between the COICA and the Department of Homeland Security seizures of domain names.
So wait, before you go on, we haven't talked about COICA on the show in a while. Remind people what that is and what the acronym stands for and what its status is.
Well, okay, fair enough. Although, actually, I'm much more interested in the Department of Homeland Security seizures because that's a real live activity that's being done by the Obama administration.
Right, not waiting for COICA.
Exactly, as opposed to a proposed legislation, which maybe our infinite wisdom will choose to reject. So it may or may not be a contradiction that we're discussing that proposal as much as we have a contradiction with what the administration is doing today with the Department of Homeland Security seizures. But COICA is an acronym for a proposed legislation that will give the ability of the administration to basically blacklist certain domain names and cut them off of the internet. It targets domain names specifically. The government has to identify domain names that it thinks are engaged in infringing activity, and then it requires a bunch of people to follow on and basically shun those sites. The legislation was introduced at the end of last year. It died based on the timing, and it has been proposed back, and there were just hearings this week to discuss its merits.
Right. So moving on then to the contradictions between those and what President Clinton is proposing as our policy touchstone for the rest of the world. Can you explain that in a bit more detail?
Let's talk about the Department of Homeland Security domain name seizures. There's been two campaigns, one targeted at counterfeiting and infringing websites, and the other targeting child pornographic websites. And in each case, the Department of Homeland Security, under its own evaluative standards, has identified sites it thinks need to be kicked off the internet. It has gone to court for an ex parte order that allows it to then seize those domain names. And then once it seizes domain names, it puts up its little success badge saying, hello, you've gotten here because we grabbed this domain name. And aren't we great? And there's some serious due process issues with the way in which the Department of Homeland Security is proceeding. It's an ex-party hearing, so it's not adversarial. The domain names don't know their target until their domain name has been grabbed. And there's deep issues about grabbing a domain name, which effectively means that they're shutting down that conversation. And some might call that a prior restraint. We might call it other types of First Amendment violative activity. Either way, what we have is without the publisher being notified, they're being kicked offline in ways that seem to transgress the kinds of spirits that we thought that Clinton was articulating in her talk. One last example of how bad it gets when the government makes these ex-parte seizures. Torrent Freak reported that one of the particular domain names that was seized was actually being shared by 84,000 websites. I'm still trying to understand exactly what happened. Let's take that as true for a moment. What it meant is all those websites got kicked off, all on an ex-parte basis without notification, and potentially most or all those websites had done nothing wrong.
Love my little slip of the tongue back there where I called her President Clinton. She is, of course, our Secretary of State. She was looking very presidential in this speech, though. Hank, what were your impressions?
Well, the $25 million figure I thought was sort of laughable. I think that if you're going to have what you call a freedom agenda and you're going to go down this path of saying to the world that we are the example, then you really ought to step up. But I agree with what Eric said as well. It's everyone's for internet freedom until they're not, and when they're not, it's generally involves political or commercial interests. And you know, I've spent a lot of time in the last couple of weeks working with some Chinese companies, and I've been struck about you know how similar the attitudes are in the United States and China to these things. We sort of point to China as being the place where internet freedom is the worst, but on the other hand, it's a very predictable system of regulations. You can work with it, whereas over here, as Eric just illustrated, it seems kind of ad hoc, and no one wants to talk about it. It just goes on. So that concerns me, because I am very much for an unregulated internet, and believe that the speech, even anonymous speech, is really important.
Right. For them to even put $25 million out there, you know, I mean, obviously it's a lot of money in some contexts, but in the context of, say, you know, your work as a venture capitalist, it's certainly, when we're talking about the global scope and import of the issues Secretary Clinton discussed, it's really just a tiny, tiny drop in the bucket of what could be applied to this cause.
Right, and that makes me wonder how serious about it they really are, you know?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Evan, in our last episode of TWiL, we were talking about these national security letters that have gone out since 2006 under the Patriot Act, some 200,000 of them. And the one note that struck me in Secretary Clinton's address was her sort of patting the U.S. on the back for it's being able to balance security concerns against transparency concerns and free speech. And she makes the assertion that here in the U.S., you know, we can feel good about the fact that our security measures are all done under the rule of law and subject to appeal. Well, I think that those national security letters are a great example of something that is absolutely not done under at least an appellate sort of rubric. Would you agree? And what do you think of her assertion?
Well, yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, because that is a good example where there is, you know, a contradiction that we've been talking about, trying to identify some of those things that are contradictory or maybe a bit paradoxical in what she's saying. And as I you know, said when we were talking about this in the earlier episode, there's certainly the need for a lack of transparency in certain investigations. I'm starting to sound like a broken record because I talk about, or I say that so much, but it's just the sheer volume that really makes it so scary. And you know that there's something dark and foreboding happening here. Along those lines, something that shoehorns into this notion here is something that I picked up on in her talk, and it's her mention of WikiLeaks. And I was glad to see that she put the emphasis on the badness of the WikiLeaks incident being the initial unauthorized access and gathering of this information. I guess what Private First Class Bradley Manning is accused of having done. So without I mean, certainly she's not going to say WikiLeaks is a wonderful thing and, go WikiLeaks and everybody should donate and all that stuff if you still can. I think she does a good job of being sensible about that and striking an appropriate balance between transparency and openness in a way, and she accomplishes that by putting the emphasis on the real bad thing that happened here, which was what happened in the first instance with the gathering and disclosure of this information, not the means by which it was distributed. So I was pleased to see a certain amount of moderation on her part when it came to that.
Right. If Secretary Clinton had been familiar with Professor Goldman, she might have said that the WikiLeaks scenario, I thought her handling of that issue was pretty good in the address, is not an instance where cyberspace exceptionalism should be applied. That, this was a crime, a taking of unauthorized, secure government information, and the means that the crime was carried out is sort of irrelevant in the larger context. Eric, what do you think about that?
Fair enough. I mean, let's stipulate that a crime occurred, although I need to know more to reach that conclusion with confidence. I come back to my earlier point that the pursuit of WikiLeaks and the way in which the government co-opted private entities to do private censorship struck me as the problematic piece. And as I said, what we're doing is we're teaching all the other countries, this is how you go and kick off content you don't like. And from my perspective, that seems deeply troubling.
Yeah, indeed. Hank, any further thoughts on this before we move on?
No.
All right. So one of the things I put in our show notes for folks to take a look at, because they're just very interesting points that you make. They're not terribly current. They're from a talk that you gave in April of last year, Copyright at 300, the anniversary of the Statute of Anne. I put them in there because you gave a nice outline of your talk, and I just wondered if you wanted to give us an overview of that and sort of the main thrust of what you got across at that time.
Sure. Well, the point of the talk was really that copyright as a structure right now is sort of trending toward irrelevance because physical copies, are becoming less and less a part of our lives. They comprise that world of stuff that George Carlin talked about. We have to have a house to get our stuff so we can have a bigger house. Your stuff. Yeah, we can have more stuff. And we always said that if people could get these things digitally, that they would, and it's turning out that that's true. And so therefore we have to think about the incentives that are supposed to be in the Copyright Act. I think that the general idea that you should give authors some incentive to authorship is a really good idea. It's embodied in the Constitution. The word copies does not appear there. It says exclusive rights. And so the idea is, what are the bundle of exclusive rights that we give to authors? Why are we giving them something that may turn out to be irrelevant? Right now, it's not going to be much of an incentive to have the right to make a printed copy and go vend it when no one wants to buy that printed copy. So if we're serious, really, about giving people rights that incent them, then maybe we ought to think about recasting that bundle of rights. And so I went down a path in the talk of talking about social media and the fact that content is a factor in engagement in social media. A piece of content, a book, can be a node if you think about a social graph. And the idea there was that even though it's true that these nodes are not as powerful as people connections, they are nodes. That's why we have book clubs. People meet, they talk about an object called a book. And the question is just, and I sort of posed it a little bit in order to get people talking, was, well, why don't we have a new statutory right to, I called it a right of community. And if people gather around your work of authorship, whether that's on the internet or through some other means, why wouldn't you have some right to benefit from that? After all, it's the thing you created that's resulting in this interaction, and this interaction is incredibly valuable. And so that was kind of the talk. I talked a little bit about Google Books and the fact that Google pushed so hard in that settlement for this right called non-display uses, which is really the right of data about what the users are doing with those works of authorship. And that's actually what got me thinking about the whole topic. So.
Great. Well, thanks for that. I will just interject since we're talking about. I love that right of community concept. That's a really interesting idea.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be that, obviously, although I think that's something to think about. But the fundamental notion is, if printed copies don't matter anymore, then how do you incent authors?
Right. Things have sure changed from the days of Napster, when having your stuff in one form or another mattered a lot more, even then in a digital form, than it matters now when things are moving around the interwebs so much more in a streaming way. Would you agree?
Well, absolutely. And I just think that we've moved in a space of 15 years from a world of massive physical libraries to online libraries, which can be much more powerful, much more accessible. This is great stuff, but we really need to think it through and think about its implications for lots of policies, including this question of copyright, which is just one of the things to think about.
Right. I love that you've posited this right of community concept, because the first time I met you down at the first D conference, looking back on that now, I realized that you were, well before any of us, I think, were allowed to be on Facebook, you were a walking, talking social network.
Well, I enjoyed meeting you, and someone said to me, I don't think it was you, someone said, she's the #2 Denise on Google. And I said, what does that mean? What exactly does that mean? And so I went and I did a Google search, and doggone it, there you were. And so it was very interesting. You're the first person who explained, what was the name of that trackback service in the early days? Technorati. You were the first person. Yeah, first person to explain that to me, and so I really appreciated your help.
Right. Eric, what do you think about this whole concept of a right of community as opposed to copyright?
Well, first of all, Denise, you'll always be the #1 Denise to me. So.
Thank you so much. And I'm always the #1 Denise to me, or I'm close, because Google now tweaks the results to customize them to you. So.
Oh, definitely. My blog always shows up as the top search for anything that I'm looking for, because Google knows that I like my own words. So,
right.
Actually, I think what Hank's describing really gets at the heart of the incentive issue, both in copyright and frankly in trademark, that we're wrestling with. And we don't have a good way of resolving it. I'm not sure if a new right would solve it, but I think the question actually really focuses us on the right issue. When I teach copyright and trademark in my IP survey class, I talk about how the IP owner is trying to extract revenues, not only from the direct sale, but from all of the fans that are generated from the work that's protected by intellectual property. And we start to explore how this fan community can be both motivated and discouraged through the application of intellectual property laws. And so I actually think it's a great business law question. How does an IP owner cultivate and extract cash from a group of fans? And it might be the answer is that by letting go of intellectual property, they get more cash value out of their overall fan base. And that may be an empirical question. It may vary by IP owner. But I think it's the right question to be asking for in so many of the cases that I teach in the class.
Right. Well, we have a lot more to discuss, and I want to get next into talking about Taco Bell making lemonade out of lemons, or maybe they're somehow making tacos out of a lawsuit. But before we get to that, I want to thank our sponsor for this show, Squarespace. This episode is brought to you by Squarespace.com, the fast and easy way to publish a high-quality website or blog. I mentioned on one of our recent shows that I had helped a friend set up her Squarespace site, and that is now up and running, and you can go see what we were able to accomplish very quickly and using all the preset templates there. She is a not very internet-savvy person, but she was able to completely come in and take over the site. You can check it out at lorriesworld.com, LORRIS world.com. And I have no compunctions about sending tons and tons of traffic her way, because one of the things that Squarespace does is optimize its bandwidth for users to make sure that it's extraordinarily difficult to bring someone's site down. So if you want to check out the site that we cobbled together, and she, of course, used her offer code to be able to use a 14-day trial by going to squarespace.com/TWiL. Make sure she really, really wanted to sign up for the service. The basic service is just $12 a month, and you can get more bandwidth and more bells and whistles for different tiers of service above that. But the $12 a month service is really, really powerful. There's a lot that comes with it, probably most users would need. The UI, as we demonstrated when we set up her site, was completely easy and intuitive to use. You can drag and drop things around in a really nice way. You can move quickly from editing the text to editing the actual structure of the site. There are hundreds of design templates to choose from, and you can just sort of try them on. It's like a fashion show for your blog. You can click a button and change the entire look and decide exactly, what sort of look you're going for, and then tweak it from there. It's an all-inclusive service for your monthly fee. There are several modules to add to create exactly the kind of site that you want. There's a blog module, forums, there's a form builder, Flickr photo display. There are widgets that easily allow you to incorporate things like Twitter and Facebook and your entire social media world. There's Google Maps and more. And of course, the statistics and tracking that are built in are excellent. They make wonderful pie charts if you're the kind of person who's into that. There's permission access handling so that multiple people can contribute to the site. There, I mentioned the cloud architecture, and it really is wonderful. It's very difficult to bring one of these sites down. The Ajax interface is so intuitive that you don't need to be an expert to use Squarespace, but if you are a CSS expert, you're going to like it even more, because it just gets out of your way and you can do your stuff exactly as you want to. There's an iPhone app and soon to be an iPad app coming along. So use Squarespace for all your website needs. Build it, host it, and update it anytime. You get a 14-day free trial when you go to squarespace.com/TWiL. You don't need a credit card. Just try it out yourself and build your own site. Be sure to check out all of their example sites so that you get an idea of all the different looks and features that are available, and check out lori'sworld.com to see one that I cobbled together myself in a matter of about half an hour. That's squarespace.com/TWiL. Thanks so much for your support, Squarespace. So guys, let's talk about Taco Bell real quick. This is something that one of our listeners put my way, and I think it's a pretty interesting approach toward a class action lawsuit. What Taco Bell is being sued for, what is actually being used to make its beef tacos.
Yeah,
and
who wants to know this is the question.
That's right. Exactly. You don't want to know how sausage is made. You don't want to know how Taco Bell tacos are made. All I know is that when I was pregnant, all I wanted to eat was In-N-Out Burger and Taco Bell. So
absolutely.
Near and dear to my heart. They are being sued in a class action sort of way about the beef. But rather than just sort of lay back, I'm not quite sure why they've decided to do this, other than just from pure PR. I suppose it could play some role in the lawsuit. But they are offering all kinds of incentives and bonuses to folks on Facebook for coming along and liking the site. And they've picked up an additional 100,000 likes. Eric, do you see social media starting to play a larger role in lawsuits as they unfold from a sort of we're a good guy standpoint?
Well, so first of all, if viewers don't know, I'm a vegetarian. And so for me, the idea that there's battles over what is beef is just a little bit foreign to me. I would have started with the premise that anyone who didn't understand that Taco Bell beef is not really beef kind of gets what they deserve. But I'm sorry, it's a little bit too much caveat emptor, perhaps. But I mean, I do think that we're seeing an interesting new way of battling back against against these false advertising lawsuits. If you think about it, most false advertising lawsuits are designed to fix a marketplace misperception about a problem, and they could be extremely damaging, even if the defendant wins in those cases. There's this cloud of doubt over the authenticity and legitimacy of the content that's being produced by the advertiser. It's so long as the lawsuit's in place and perhaps even thereafter. And so Taco Bell, I thought, did a really neat job of battling back on the court of public opinion, saying, look, you guys, who cares what percentage of beef is beef? You guys like our junk food, then we're going to give it away to you for free. Come and be a part of our community. This goes right back to what we were just talking about with Hank's proposal. Taco Bell knows it's catering to this community of fans. And instead of trying to get all lawyerly on the community of fans, they said, we're going to shower you with gifts. Be loyal to us some more. I thought it was brilliant.
Evan, do you see... Sorry, go ahead, Hank.
I was going to say, you can get a crunchy seasoned beef taco for liking Taco Bell. It's fantastic.
It is. Gonna have to go over there.
Hank?
Sorry?
I have not personally taken advantage of the opportunity.
They wouldn't be as good as those tacos we had at D, though.
Oh, that is true. But $3,000 cheaper.
Yeah, that's true.
So Eric, I like this question, maybe issue of paying for likes on Facebook. So what do you think about that?
Great question. And we could try another way where advertisers are being allowed to do the sponsored stories on Facebook, which are also basically pulling out status reports, and the advertisers paying to show them. And Facebook definitely raises a bunch of questions about what is advertising and when is something that is an editorial decision also commercial enough that we treat it like an advertisement. I don't see any inherent problem with, quote, paying for likes. I imagine that if there was some kind of surreptitious issue that wasn't being disclosed, we might have greater concern about it. But I think the rules are clear. You get what was it, crunchy seasoned beef taco for a like. I mean, that's an open market transaction. I think the hard part is that many people may not understand that when you like something, a bunch of extra things happen in Facebook's database. And so though we might view it as a fully informed economic transaction, I personally would need to be bought with something much more expensive than a crunchy seasoned beef taco. And of course, it would have to be vegetarian as well.
Exactly. Well, according to the lawsuit, it mostly is.
But I'm sorry, Denise, just to be clear, in my world, there is a difference between mostly vegetarian and vegetarian. It's kind of like off the cliff.
Right. Got it. Evan, I'm a little worried when I think about this whole issue that Taco Bell is engaged in incentivizing these likes in an effort not just to build public opinion, but to build public opinion among potential jurors.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, there's no doubt that there's a lot of attention anyway on all of this, and so what makes it more complicated in that situation there is they're actually giving something of value to these potential jurors. So there's certainly nothing wrong with them doing PR or whatever for to whomever it is that's going to get that message. But what complicates it definitely is giving stuff away, actually giving some consideration for you to think of Taco Bell in a positive way.
Hey, Evan, can I join on that?
Sure.
Would, in part of voir dire, would you kick off a juror who actually did like the on Facebook to get the taco?
Oh, yeah. Not only would you do that, but you would send a subpoena to Facebook and get their whole profile information.
Yeah.
Engage in some very aggressive.
Yeah, I think that I'm sorry to interrupt, but I think that there's a business issue here about gaming the graph. People have really learned how to game search in some really strange ways to affect the results. We were talking about that a little bit earlier on Google, but I think this is one of the first times I've seen, at least explicitly, people come out and say, we're going to change the density of the social graph using money to do that. And Eric was right when he said there's a lot of things that happen that come out of these kinds of connections because they affect the algorithms that determine what people get served up on Facebook as being something that they might want to connect with. And so to the extent that you've affected that by essentially increasing the number of connections, you've really gamed, in a way, I'm sure Facebook is all over this, but you've gamed the graph in a way that pushes people to do one thing or another. So there's actually some pretty savvy advertising and cultural manipulation is too strong a word, but cultural attention being paid here, I think.
Right. Unless anybody else has any crunchy seasoned beef comments to contribute along these lines, I'd like to move on to something that Eric contributed, wanted to talk about today, and that is Microsoft's new trademark policy. That is a Google-style policy toward keyword ads. You want to tell us about that?
Yeah, so for 7 years or more, we've been battling over search engines selling trademarked keywords to advertisers. So Coke can buy the Pepsi keyword and display a Coke advertisement to anyone searches for the word Pepsi. Let's put aside for a moment whether the advertiser is committing trademark infringement by purchasing that keyword. That remains to be a more complicated question. But a number of plaintiffs have gone after the search engines for selling those keywords to an advertiser for these usually competitive purposes. Google, for a long time, has had a idiosyncratic policy. They've said effectively, trademark owner, if you're unhappy about our sales of your trademark as a keyword, tough. What we'll do for you is we will block your trademark from showing up in the ad copy, but we're going to keep selling the trademark whether you like it or not. And other search engines have said, no, we will actually disable those keywords so that they cannot be purchased whatsoever, including Microsoft and Yahoo. Now, Microsoft and Yahoo have basically merged into one entity for this purpose. Microsoft is handling Yahoo's ad sales in this area. And Microsoft just this week announced that it's going to change its policy to become just like Google's. So they're going to now refuse trademark owners' requests to stop selling the trademark as keywords for advertising. And I thought this was interesting in a couple of fronts. First of all, it shows how much progress Google has made in clarifying the legal framework, but also it raises the question whether Microsoft is getting a little bit desperate. This is clearly going to increase their revenues from their search engine advertising offering, and I wonder if they're making just a pure cash grab here in ways that we're not used to seeing Microsoft doing.
Whoa. So you use this phrase, clarifying the legal framework. Google has made progress in clarifying the legal framework. They've made progress in getting things to go the way they want it to go. Okay, that's what they've done. And I think we have to give some credit to Microsoft here. I don't suppose I'd normally be in that position, but this is a group that has really, over time, taken, I think, a very thoughtful approach to everything they're doing on the intellectual property front, and I think that they've tortured over it a little bit. I know some people that are there, and they've come out with policies that I think have been very thoughtful, and they've changed them only when things got quote unquote clarified over a long period of time. So, and by the way, I have this strange little thing going on with my eye, so apologize for that. But I think it's really to just say that Microsoft is desperate is it's not good. I think that they've moved from the position that they had over a long period of time, and I think, to their credit, I think they've been thoughtful about all these issues, copyright, patent, whatever you want to say, to my view. Anyhow.
Right. Well, this is certainly a sweet spot for your blog, Eric, the technology and marketing blog, as we are right at the crux of tech and marketing with keyword ads. Do you see any? How do you think this is going to develop going forward?
I personally think we're at the end of these battles. We've had a number of lawsuits over the years, well over a dozen different challenges to Google's practices. They're not complete, but I think that we're nearing the end of it. And so I think we're just going to move on. I think we're going to find, trademark owners are going to find some other interface to freak out about, whether it's the way that Twitter allows its ad sales or Facebook allows its ad sales or something like that. I think that we're going to look back at the 2000s and into 2010 as a time when trademark owners really got overzealous about their rights in the search engine context. And I think 20 years from now we'll look back and say, what in the world were they worried about? Why were they freaking out so badly? So in that sense, I think we're at the end of this process and moving on to the next freak out.
All right. Well, let's move on to something that might or might not make some of our listeners and viewers freak out when they think about it, because it's not something you think about every day. It's also our tip of the week. This will be our last story, and it's a story from Ed Bott at the Microsoft report at ZDNet called "Who Owns Your Digital Downloads? Hint, It's Not You." And Ed's point is something we've discussed on the show before, that the ownership rights that you might think that you have in something that you've bought from either Amazon, if it's a digital artifact from them, or from iTunes, or from eMusic, that the terms of service around these things really specify that what you're getting is not a file that you have ownership rights in. And this leads to some really weird things when you try and do things like sell an iPod that is loaded up with stuff that you've downloaded from iTunes. But what you've gotten from these folks is a license, and how those licenses play out when you go and try and do something like sell an iPod. It makes for some interesting discussion. But the tip here is just that, hint, it's not you, as Ed says, that there is this language in the licensing agreements that specifies that these things that you are possibly building up your library. And again, we're moving away from this kind of a world where things are these digital artifacts that take up hard drive space, and more towards a streaming environment, as we talked about earlier today. But it's bears noticing and paying attention to that your rights in things from eMusic and Amazon Music and iTunes are going to be different than if you go and buy a CD. And Ed's takeaway is, so go and buy the CD. But is that really a realistic thing to be telling people? I mean, it's like, okay, well, then let's also just go back and watch some Archie Bunker while we're at it. What do you think, Hank?
Well, there's a whole line of cases starting with in the 30s having to do with people putting restrictions on sound recordings, and they started out saying no, you can't, but I think we're past that now, and I think it's clear to everyone that these are licenses. You have limited rights in them. There is no first sale associated with them. The real tragedy of this, of course, is that for record company accounting purposes, they account to their artists as if these are sales and not licenses. Most record contracts provide for a 50-50 split on license revenues and only like a 90-10 split in favor of the record company on sales. And so even though you think you've got a license and the record company says to the vendor that they're giving a license, they account to the artist as if it's only a retail sale. There's been some court cases around that, and we'll see how it turns out. But, I don't know. It doesn't bother me that much. Does it bother anybody else?
I think it's bothering people less and less, that they are figuring out how to navigate this world, and that there's less friction around what you can do with certain things. Although Eric may disagree with me. Do you, Eric?
I look at this actually really as a marketplace issue, that if people understand what they're buying and they make a good, smart, informed choice for themselves, I don't have a problem with saying you can buy 100% rights, or you can buy 90% rights, or you can buy 70% rights based on whatever you value. That's not the reality we're in, unfortunately. And so the theory sounds great. In practice, I think there's still many people who think when I download from iTunes, I'm getting the exact same thing as if I ripped that same music from my CD. So we're not at the point where I think consumers are making the right choice for themselves, fully informed. Perhaps that will change over time. Perhaps the new generation, whatever that means, will understand that a download is a restricted version, and that's all you get to do with it, and that's the deal. And in theory, that creates marketplace opportunities for someone to offer a different or perhaps better deal. So I don't have a single answer for this. I know that I value the first sale right a lot. And in fact, I have frequently gone and bought CDs as opposed to downloading the music online. Frankly, it's actually because I can buy a used CD cheaper often than I can download that same music. So there's a weird price inefficiency that the cost of the physical object used plus shipping is often cheaper than a fresh download of the bits. I don't know when that will change, and as fewer CDs get released in the marketplace, perhaps that will fix itself. But the first sale is great. I buy used content all the time, and oftentimes for less than I would have had to spend to download.
Right, and then you probably rip it and then resell it, because who wants to store the dang things? And off it goes to lead another life.
I comply with the law.
But the point's out there. We're moving toward a service model because all this is pretty inconvenient, and people just want the service. That's all.
Yep. Absolutely. Evan, any further nuances on this point?
Well, just on that point there, looking at it as a service model, that would seem to underscore a real tension or weak point, I guess, would be a more accurate way of saying it, in copyright law, where it's there. And this is, I think we were talking about this earlier in some of Hank's comments from that event last April about how the notion of copying is declining in importance. The notion of the right to copy is declining in importance. And now with things more as a network and the ability to stream content and kind of have access to it wherever you are across platforms, on different devices, it seems to me that the emphasis in copyright should be more toward a right of access rather than a right of copy. And that's a motif that we talk about from time to time on here. It seems to comport better with the way that the model is, and it's being afforded by the technology that's there and that is emerging.
Right. Well, that's right. I know you got to wrap, but I think that the key thing there is that we have new. It really is a new world, and I'm sort of the last person who you would think would be talking about additional rights under copyright. But I think it is time to sort of reframe all those, and if it means coming up with new rights that are early on seem to be more expansive, I'm okay with that, because I think authors need these incentives.
That's what I was going to say. Is on your next trip to Washington, Hank, right of access, right of community. We look forward to you swaying our lawmakers.
If I can just jump in briefly, just to mention, in a sense, we do already have the right of access, and that's the anti-circumvention laws and the DMCA. And we're seeing a number of copyright owners use those provisions to do exactly what you're describing, to control access to a server that contains their copyrighted material.
But that's lame. That's ad hoc. That's it's a real stretch. It's a real stretch, and that's why we need to reconsider the law, I think.
Yeah.
I have a couple of resources of the week to toss out there, and we'll mention that yes, people who are ticked off or find their expectations not met with respect to their digital downloads and what they can do with them might use ripoff.com, which Eric has a great post up on his technology and marketing law blog right now that we didn't get to in our story, but in our stories today. But I encourage you to go read.
Denise, I'm sorry, yes. you mean ripoffreport.com?
Yes, ripoffreport.com. Sorry, not ripoff.com.
President Clinton goes to ripoff.com.
Exactly. This looks like the current iteration or the next generation of consumer reports is Ripoff Report. But there's so much good stuff over on Eric's blog. One that I want to call out as one of our resources of the week are your report on the top 5 cyber law developments of 2010, Eric. I think if anyone hasn't checked it out yet, they definitely should. It's good context for where we are now. And also I want to point people toward Doc Searle's blog, where he has a great post up this week called The State of the Vroom, VROOM. Just a great big aggregation with commentary on stuff going on in the vendor relationship management arena, which we've talked about on the show a lot, trying to shift people's way of thinking about data and its control to the user as opposed to what you have with various vendors and what they can do with it. So definitely check out the latest from Doc Searle's putting it all together over on his site. And I'll just go around one time and see if you guys have any closing final thoughts as we wrap up TWiL 100 here. Hank?
I just want to say congratulations, Denise. It's a great show. You've done a great job.
Thank you so much. It's great to have you back, and I hope we don't have to wait another 100 episodes to do so. In the meantime, folks, Hank is on Twitter. He's Hank Berry over there. Go follow him, and it's definitely.
I think I have 3 followers now, maybe
Good.
4.
Well,
I just followed you today, Hank.
Oh, okay,
Yay.
thanks.
Well, you've got to tweet a little more. You're a little few and far between with your tweets.
Yeah.
We'd love to hear more from you. So, because you always have brilliant things to say, so let us encourage you to share more of them with the world in that format and whatever other format, including being here on our show. We really loved the chance to talk with you today. So, thanks so much.
Great to be here. Thank you.
Eric, never not awesome to have you. So glad you could join us again for the show.
Oh, thank you so much. And what a treat to be on the 100th episode. I feel like I should have brought out my pom-poms or my kazoo or something to celebrate properly. But another great show. Always a pleasure. This whole series has been fantastic.
Thank you so much. And I promise the next time I'm up in your neck of the woods when I offer to take you to lunch, it'll be at the local Indian restaurant and not Taco Bell.
Fantastic. I will even treat.
Thank you so much. Folks, go check out Professor Coleman's Technology and Marketing Law blog, and you can follow him on Twitter at Eric Goldman. And Evan, thanks so much for being here today and for so many TWiLs. It's great to wrap up the 100th show with you.
For sure. And the only thing that would have made it better is to see Professor Goldman with pom-poms and a kazoo. So it's going to take a while to get that image out.
And a 35% beef taco.
That's right. We'll never see that, I trust. But again, congratulations. It's such a pleasure to join you here every week. I love it, and wonderful show. So awesome work.
Thank you so much, and awesome work to you too. And we'll end this Mutual Admiration Society by suggesting that folks continue to follow along with your awesome work during the week at internetcases.com, and do follow along with TWiL during the week at facebook.com/thisweekinlaw, where we put up our pre-show questions and love to get your feedback on the things we should and will talk about during the show. And tune into us live on Fridays, 11 PST and 1900 UTC at live.twit.tv, and follow along with us in the IRC at irc.twit.tv. We love having you along with the ride for us as we record the show. And with that, we'll see you soon for episode 101. Take care, everyone.